Have you ever wondered if a man begging for space to find himself is actually orchestrating a perfectly calculated robbery? My husband of 6 years packed his bags, claiming he needed exactly 4 weeks to reignite his creative spark. He returned 28 days later, swearing I was his only muse. He forgot one crucial detail about who he married. I do not just break down and cry, I rewrite the entire system, and I hit detonate. Hello, wonderful listeners, and welcome back to Zoe Revenge Stories. Unfortunately, YouTube recently demonetized our channel, leaving us without the budget to keep our operations running. If you find today's story captivating, please consider supporting us with just $1 so we can pay our hardworking team to cover their living expenses and continue creating these narratives for you. You can donate by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or by clicking the link in the description or comments below. Now, let me introduce you to Gianna Nichols. The roasted chicken had gone cold on the porcelain plates, the rich scent of rosemary completely overpowered by the suffocating tension in the dining room. I am Gianna Nichols, a 33-year-old three-dimensional environment artist at Novaris Renderworks here in Seattle, and I have always possessed a talent for building flawless digital worlds. I control the lighting, the textures, the very atmosphere of a scene. Yet, as I sat across from Julian Harper, my husband of 6 years, I realized I had completely lost control of my own reality. I need a break from this marriage. Gianna, he said. His voice was steady, devoid of the warmth that used to define our relationship. He did not look at me. Instead, he stared at a water stain on the oak dining table. Julian was a freelance visual effects supervisor, a man whose entire career revolved around making the impossible look real on screen. Lately, however, he had been wearing the mask of a tortured genius. "A break," I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "What does that even mean? Are you leaving me?" "I am losing my creative spark," he replied, finally meeting my gaze with a look of practiced exhaustion. "The pressure of this domestic life, the routine, it is suffocating my talent. I cannot breathe in this house anymore. I need exactly 1 month of complete isolation to recalibrate my artistic vision. I need space to figure out who I am as an artist again." The words felt rehearsed, almost algorithmic. I scrambled for a lifeline, my mind racing through solutions the way I would debug a broken rendering pipeline. "We can fix this. Julian, let us go to marriage counseling. I can give you the guest room. We can set boundaries." "No," he snapped, the coldness in his tone startling me. "Therapy is just another anchor dragging me down. I am leaving tonight." He stood up, abandoning his untouched dinner, and walked straight to our bedroom. I followed him, my vision blurring with tears, watching as he tossed designer shirts and expensive slacks into his leather duffel bag. When I asked him where he was going, he threw out a vague story about a friend offering him a secluded creative retreat up in the mountains, a place with no cellular service and nothing but pine trees to distract him. "Do not call me," he instructed as he zipped the bag shut. "I will reach out when the 4 weeks are up." Then, the front door clicked shut. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood in the middle of our meticulously decorated living room, feeling the hollow ache of abandonment settling into my chest. For exactly 10 minutes, I allowed myself to be the broken, discarded wife. I cried until my lungs burned. But then, the analytical side of my brain, the part that spends 40 hours a week managing complex data structures, snapped to attention. Something was wrong. The narrative did not render properly. I wiped my eyes and walked into his home office. His desk was wiped clean, his expensive monitors powered down, but my eyes darted to the empty space next to his docking station. The matte black external hard drive was missing. It was not his drive. It was mine. For the past 3 years, I had been spending my nights and weekends quietly developing an intricate, unreleased library of three-dimensional assets. It was a massive virtual reality environment, entirely built from scratch. Possessing custom physics and proprietary textures, it was my masterpiece, my ticket to becoming an art director. Julian knew about it. but he had zero technical ability to actually build something of that magnitude. Why would a man seeking a spiritual retreat in the mountains need a terabyte of high-end graphical data? The sorrow evaporated, instantly replaced by a sharp, icy clarity. I marched into my own workspace and powered on my dual-monitor setup. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard. I did not need to guess where he was. I just needed to ask the data. Since that hard drive was linked to my secure cloud network for automatic backups, the moment it connected to the internet, it would ping the server. I pulled up the cloud synchronization logs, my eyes scanning the endless lines of green code. There it was, an active connection established just 20 minutes after he drove away. I highlighted the Internet Protocol address and ran a quick geolocation trace. The coordinates did not point to a rustic cabin in the snowy mountains. The map zoomed in, placing a bright red pin directly on a luxury high-rise building right in the beating heart of downtown Seattle. It was one of the most exclusive, hyper-expensive penthouse suites in the city. Julian was not seeking isolation. He was seeking a very specific, highly funded audience, and he had just stolen my life's work to do it. The game had changed, and I was about to rewrite the rules. For exactly 14 days and 14 nights, the silence in our house was absolute. Julian played his role with sickening perfection. He maintained complete radio silence, ensuring not a single text message or missed call would break the illusion of his profound isolation to the outside world and to his colleagues who occasionally emailed. He was an artist standing at the edge of a metaphorical cliff, fighting to reclaim his soul from the crushing weight of domesticity. But inside my home office, the narrative was entirely different. I did not shed another tear. The initial sorrow had been burned away, leaving behind a cold, hyper-focused fury. I sealed myself in the room, existing on black coffee and the hum of my cooling fans. I was no longer a discarded partner. I was a data hunter, and my husband had just become my primary target. The Internet Protocol address I extracted on that first night was merely the outermost layer of the defense. I began to peel it back. I ran automated network scanners and cross-referenced the geolocation coordinates with property tax records and secure residential databases. The red pin on the map belonged to a multi-level penthouse suite valued at over $12 million. The owner was not an anonymous real estate holding company. It was Chloe Vance. My stomach twisted as her professional profile loaded on my secondary monitor. In the Pacific Northwest technology and entertainment circles, Chloe Vance was a titan. She was a wildly successful virtual reality director and an aggressive venture capitalist known for bankrolling visionary digital startups. She had the power to make or break careers with a single signature. She was also entirely out of Julian's league, both financially and intellectually. Yet, there he was, broadcasting from her private network. The physical betrayal was a bitter pill, but the professional violation was what truly ignited the fire in my blood. I needed to see exactly what he was doing with my life's work. Julian was technically competent, but he was merely a visual effects supervisor. His job was to manipulate existing footage. He did not know how to build a dynamic world from the ground up. I did. And because I built the proprietary asset management system that housed my virtual reality project, I also wrote the security protocols. Julian assumed he was operating the software in an offline, untraceable mode. He was completely unaware that my core code contained a hidden diagnostic backdoor designed to report crash logs directly to my private server. On the 7th night of his fake retreat, at exactly 3 a.m, I executed a secure override command. My monitor flickered, and suddenly, it was as if I was standing right behind him in that penthouse. I watched his cursor move across my screen in real time. He was systematically opening my most complex master files. I watched in disgust as he clumsily navigated the node trees of my custom lighting engine, taking screenshots of the wireframe models. He was actively stripping my digital watermarks from the environmental textures and replacing them with his own metadata. The puzzle pieces locked together with a sickening crunch. He was not just stealing my files. He was wearing my creative identity, He was presenting 3 years of my grueling, unpaid, visionary labor as his own brilliant prototype. He was using my virtual universe as the ultimate bait to secure a multi-million-dollar development contract with Chloe's studio. Men who believe they have orchestrated the perfect crime always leave a trail of arrogant mistakes. While monitoring his outgoing network traffic over the next few days, my automated scripts flagged a recurring connection to a secure banking server. It was not his personal account. It was an old joint checking account we had opened during the first month of our marriage, an account I had not thought about in over 4 years, but which still carried my social security number as a primary authorized user. Bypassing the security gateway took me less than 10 minutes, as the secondary recovery option was still linked to an old college email address I controlled. The transaction history cascaded down my screen, and the sheer audacity of his actions took my breath away. 3 days after he stood in our dining room and begged for space to find himself, there was a cleared transaction for $8,500 at a high-end boutique jeweler. The digitized receipt explicitly detailed the purchase of a diamond tennis bracelet. 2 days after that, a charge for $14,200 appeared from an elite travel concierge service. I pulled the invoice data. It was for 2 first-class international airline tickets and a 10-day reservation for a private overwater bungalow in the Maldives, scheduled for exactly 2 months from now. The passenger manifest listed 2 names, Julian Harper and Chloe Vance. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, the glow of the monitors casting long shadows across the empty room. There was no crisis of faith. There was no desperate need for artistic recalibration. The 30 days he had so emotionally demanded was nothing more than a meticulously calculated operational window. He needed exactly 4 weeks to leverage my intellectual property, seduce a wealthy investor, lock down a massive studio contract, and secure his financial independence. He was building his glittering new empire using the very bricks he had stolen from my mind, preparing to serve me with divorce papers the moment his new life was funded and secure. He truly believed he had executed a flawless heist, leaving the naive, heartbroken wife behind in the dust. He thought I was just collateral damage in his grand ascent, but he fundamentally misunderstood the architecture of the trap he was standing in. He was playing with my code, my servers, and my rules, and I was about to teach him what happens when you try to steal a world from the architect who built it. Exactly 28 days after he walked out the door, the smart lock on our front entrance chimed. I was sitting on the living room sofa, waiting in the silence. The heavy oak door swung open, and there stood Julian. He did not look like a man who had spent a month roughing it in a secluded mountain cabin fighting internal demons. His skin possessed that expensive, subtle glow of a high-end spa treatment, and he was wearing a brand-new tailored jacket that cost more than my first car. In his right hand, he held a large iced oat milk vanilla latte from my favorite independent coffee shop down the street. It was the ultimate peace offering from a textbook narcissist. He walked toward me, dropping his travel bag to the floor, his face shifting into a perfectly practiced expression of profound sorrow and desperate longing. If I had not spent the last 4 weeks watching his digital footprints buy diamonds for a billionaire director, I might have actually believed the tears welling in his eyes. He set the coffee on the glass table and dropped to his knees in front of me, taking my hands in his. "Gianna," he breathed out, his voice thick with manufactured emotion. "The past 4 weeks helped me realize you are the only muse of my life. I want us to start over." It was a masterful, sickening performance. He spoke of how the silence of the wilderness had deafened him, how every sunset reminded him of the warmth of our marriage, and how he had cast aside his foolish pride to come back to his true north. He painted a vibrant picture of our future, weaving a tapestry of renewed love as if his luxury island vacation with another woman had been a holy pilgrimage for our relationship. I let my lower lip tremble. I forced a ragged gasp, allowing genuine tears of pure, unadulterated rage to masquerade as overwhelming relief. I threw my arms around his neck and buried my face in his expensive new fabric. "I missed you so much, Julian," I sobbed against his shoulder. I am so glad you are home. I hugged him tightly, welcoming the prodigal husband back into the sanctuary he had tried to destroy. He stroked my hair, whispering sweet assurances into my ear. He had absolutely no idea that inside the breast pocket of my cardigan, my smartphone was actively recording every single syllable of his magnificent, hypocritical lie. The honeymoon phase lasted exactly 8 hours. We ordered takeout. We drank an expensive bottle of red wine, and Julian played the role of the attentive, reborn husband flawlessly. But beneath his charming smiles, I could see the frantic ticking of a clock behind his eyes. His leg bounced under the table. He was a man standing on a landmine, waiting for the courage to step off. The true purpose of his triumphant return finally revealed itself around 9 o'clock that evening. We were sitting at the kitchen island when he let out a heavy sigh and rubbed his temples in feigned exhaustion. "Is something wrong, honey?" I asked, my voice dripping with saccharine concern. "Oh, it is just work," he said, waving a hand dismissively before leaning in closer. "Actually, while I was away, I had this massive breakthrough. I managed to land a gigantic virtual reality project. It is going to put us on the map financially. Gianna, it is everything we ever dreamed of." "That is amazing," I cheered, taking a sip of my wine. "I am so proud of you." Julian shifted uncomfortably on his stool. "The thing is, the studio expects a live pitch in front of their top investors the morning after next. I have the entire world built. The concepts are flawless, but the rendering pipeline is fighting me. I am a bit clumsy with this new software architecture. The shaders are breaking, and the texture nodes are completely scrambled. If I cannot get it to compile properly, I am going to lose the entire contract." He reached across the marble counter and took my hand again, looking at me with those pleading, soulful eyes. "Gianna, you are a genius with this kind of technical back-end stuff," he begged. "Could you possibly take a look at my files? Just help me optimize the rendering path. I would not ask if I was not completely desperate." It took every ounce of physical self-control I possessed not to burst into hysterical laughter right there in the kitchen. He was not just desperate. He was drowning. He had successfully stolen the outer shell of my universe, but he lacked the fundamental intellect to make the complex physics engine actually run. He had sold Chloe Vance a stolen luxury sports car, but he did not know how to start the engine, and his grand presentation was less than 36 hours away. He had come crawling back to his wife not for love, but for emergency tech support. He needed the architect to fix the very building he had plundered from her. I looked deeply into the eyes of the man I had married, the man who thought I was nothing more than a convenient, oblivious stepping stone for his new life. I offered him a warm, reassuring smile. "Of course, I will help you. Julian," I said softly. "You know I would do anything for your career. Just give me the files, and I will fix everything tonight." A wave of profound relief washed over his face. He kissed my forehead, calling me his savior. He truly believed he had won. He had secured his wealthy investor, kept his wife pliable, and was about to get his stolen project optimized for free. He did not realize that by begging me to touch his presentation files, he had just eagerly handed me the detonator. I brewed a fresh pot of dark roast coffee, pouring him a large mug with 2 sugars, exactly the way he liked it. Julian brought the external hard drive into my office, plugging it into my workstation with a heavy, dramatic sigh. Within 20 minutes, he was stretched out on the leather sofa behind me, a soft throw blanket pulled up to his chin. He fell asleep to the rhythmic clacking of my mechanical keyboard, completely at peace, trusting his devoted wife to salvage his $1,000,000 lie. Once his breathing deepened into a steady, rhythmic snore, my demeanor shifted. The obedient, helpful spouse vanished. I pulled up the core architecture of the virtual reality environment on my primary monitor. He was right about one thing. The rendering pipeline was completely bottlenecked. The shaders were misaligned because he did not understand how my custom lighting engine processed volumetric shadows. I spent exactly 2 hours legitimately fixing the graphical errors. I had to ensure the environment would boot up flawlessly. The trap needed to look incredibly inviting before the steel jaws snapped shut. Then came the real work. I opened a command terminal and began writing a custom execution script. This was my Trojan horse. I did not just want to break the file. I wanted to orchestrate a public execution. I buried the malicious payload deep within the foundational geometry nodes of the environment, weaving the code directly into the primary rendering protocol where no basic diagnostic tool would ever look. I programmed the script with a very specific, unbreakable trigger sequence. When the presentation file launched, it would run perfectly for exactly 60 seconds. 60 seconds was enough time for the investors to look at the massive screen, enough time for them to be utterly mesmerized, and enough time for Julian to bask in his stolen glory. But at second 61, the payload would execute a catastrophic graphical override. It was designed to strip away every single high-resolution texture, every carefully calibrated light source, and every beautiful three-dimensional model, leaving behind a raw, ugly wireframe void. Then, it would project a massive, unskippable visual overlay in glowing red typography across the entire digital sky. To ensure the performance was unforgettable, I linked the visual override to an audio command, embedding the hidden voice recording I had captured earlier that evening directly into the spatial audio tracks. Finally, I locked the cage. I applied a military-grade, 256-bit encryption protocol to all the master directories on his drive. I tied the decryption path exclusively to a cryptographic master key generated on my secure offline server. If anyone tried to forcibly pause the simulation, alter the code, or uninstall the Trojan horse without my specific 32-character alphanumeric password, the entire project file would instantly corrupt and permanently delete itself. The trap was set, sealed, and mathematically impossible to defuse. At 7 in the morning, the bright sun pierced through the office blinds. Julian stirred on the sofa, stretching his arms with a loud yawn. I handed him a silver Universal Serial bus drive. "It is done," I told him, offering a weary but supportive smile. "The rendering path is completely optimized. It will run perfectly." He plugged it into his laptop, did a quick 30-second spot check of the starting area, and beamed. The graphics were undeniably stunning. He kissed me passionately on the cheek, calling me his absolute savior, and rushed out the door to prepare for the biggest presentation of his fraudulent career. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my thick leather binder and drove straight to the downtown offices of the most ruthless intellectual property attorney in the Pacific Northwest. For 3 solid hours, I sat in a glass-walled conference room, laying out 3 years of version histories, time-stamped cloud synchronization logs, original concept sketches, and the embedded security signatures that definitively proved I was the sole creator of the virtual reality universe. My lawyer was astounded by the meticulous paper trail. He assured me we had an ironclad federal case for intellectual property theft and corporate fraud. By noon, I was back in our house. The silence was no longer suffocating. It was liberating. I walked into the master bedroom and pulled a single black suitcase from the closet. I packed only the absolute essentials, enough clothes for 1 week, my primary laptop, and my personal documents. I did not take a single item we had purchased together. I walked back into the home office and stood over the computer keyboard. I slipped the diamond wedding band off my left ring finger. The metal felt incredibly heavy, a shackle I had worn for 6 years. I placed it dead center on the spacebar, a silent, gleaming monument to a dead marriage. I hailed a premium ride service and checked into a high-security suite at a luxury hotel overlooking the harbor. Once the bellhop left, I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the sprawling Seattle skyline. I pulled my smartphone from my pocket, toggled the settings to Do Not Disturb, and tossed it onto the plush king-size bed. The storm was coming, and I had just secured the absolute best seat in the house. Inside the sleek, glass-walled screening auditorium of Vance Virtual Labs, the atmosphere was thick with multi-million-dollar anticipation. Dozens of the most prominent venture capitalists, angel investors, and technology executives in Seattle sat arranged in rows of plush leather recliners. These were individuals who controlled hundreds of millions of dollars in capital, people who did not tolerate having their time wasted. At the front of the room stood a state-of-the-art, custom-built light-emitting diode wall spanning 50 feet across, waiting to showcase the future. Chloe Vance sat in the center of the front row, wearing a tailored white suit, radiating the smug, impenetrable confidence of a woman who believed she had just secured the most lucrative digital asset of the decade. And there was Julian. He was dressed in a pristine charcoal suit, his hair perfectly styled, holding a wireless presentation clicker like it was a royal scepter. He stood at the podium, completely intoxicated by his own fabricated brilliance. He welcomed the titans of the industry, delivering a smooth, heavily rehearsed monologue about his unique creative vision. He spoke eloquently about how he had toiled in absolute isolation for the past 4 weeks, pouring his very soul into the code to bring this masterpiece to life. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian announced, his voice echoing through the premium surround sound system with absolute authority. "Welcome to the absolute pinnacle of immersive reality." He pressed the central button on his clicker. The room plunged into pitch darkness. A booming, orchestral bass note rattled the floorboards, vibrating through the chests of every investor in the room. Then, the massive screen ignited. The graphics were beyond flawless. They were breathtaking. A hyper-realistic digital metropolis materialized before their eyes, bathed in the rich, golden hour lighting of a simulated sunset. The volumetric clouds cast dynamic, moving shadows over towering glass skyscrapers. Flocks of digital birds reacted in real time to the shifting wind physics, while the water in the harbor reflected the light with perfect, ray-traced accuracy. The audience actually gasped. Several notoriously stoic investors leaned forward in their seats, their eyes wide with genuine astonishment. Chloe smiled, crossing her arms, already calculating the massive return on her investment. Julian stepped back from the podium, puffing out his chest, absorbing the adulation. For exactly 59 seconds, he was the undisputed king of the technology world. He was a visionary genius. Then came the 60th second. The orchestral score swelled toward a triumphant, sweeping crescendo. But instead of hitting the peak, a deafening, violent blast of digital static shattered the harmony. The beautiful golden sunset instantly froze. The audience flinched, some covering their ears. Julian frowned, tapping his clicker once, then twice, looking back at the podium laptop with a flash of annoyance. Suddenly, the sky on the giant screen cracked like a pane of shattered glass. A violent, digital shudder ripped through the entire metropolis. Every single high-resolution texture, every carefully calibrated light source, and every beautiful three-dimensional model was violently ripped away from the framework. The magnificent skyscrapers dissolved into naked, ugly wireframes. The lush, simulated world was brutally stripped down to its bare, skeletal mathematics. A collective murmur of shock and confusion swept through the auditorium. Before Julian could even utter a single word of apology, the dark void of the screen was instantly weaponized. Thousands of lines of blinding, neon-red text began cascading down the massive 50-foot display, flashing with the aggressive, rhythmic pulse of a nuclear distress beacon. It did not display a generic system error. In massive block letters, 5 feet tall, the message repeated over and over, illuminating the faces of the audience in a sinister crimson glow. Stolen property. Copyright Gianna Nichols. The red glare washed over the horrified faces of the investors. Julian dropped his clicker. It clattered loudly against the hardwood floor, echoing in the sudden silence. He lunged for the podium, his face instantly draining of all blood, turning a sickly shade of gray. "Just a minor technical glitch," he stammered into the microphone, his voice cracking with rising, undeniable panic. "A malicious hack from a competitor. Give me exactly 1 second to reset." But my Trojan horse was far from finished. The static faded, replaced by crystal-clear audio echoing through the cinema-quality speakers. It was not a soundtrack. It was my voice. "Is something wrong, honey?" The sound of my feigned, saccharine concern filled the massive auditorium. Then came his response, whining, pathetic, and undeniably clear. The rendering pipeline is fighting me. I am a bit clumsy with this new software architecture. The shaders are breaking, and the texture nodes are completely scrambled. If I cannot get it to compile properly, I am going to lose the entire contract. The investors sat in stunned, paralyzed silence. The contrast was devastating. A public execution of his character. The arrogant man standing on stage claiming to be a solitary visionary was currently whining through the speakers like an incompetent child. Gianna, you are a genius with this kind of technical back-end stuff, his recorded voice begged, echoing off the acoustic panels. Could you possibly take a look at my files? Just help me optimize the rendering path. I would not ask if I was not completely desperate. Complete and utter chaos erupted. The illusion shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Chloe Vance shot up from her front row seat, her face ghostly pale, her jaw tightly clenched. Her eyes were wide with a volatile mixture of absolute humiliation and boiling rage. She had staked her immense professional reputation on this presentation, hyping it up to her most vital financial partners, and she had just been exposed as the gullible backer of a pathetic intellectual property thief. "Turn it off!" Chloe shrieked, her composed, elite demeanor entirely destroyed. "Julian, turn that off right this second." Julian was already hammering the mechanical keys on his laptop. Sweat poured down his forehead, staining the stiff collar of his expensive new shirt. "I cannot," he screamed back, his voice thick with raw, animalistic terror. "It is locked. The whole system is completely locked out." He slammed his fists onto the keyboard, mashing the escape keys and the power buttons, but the terminal window remained frozen, demanding a 32-character decryption key he would never, ever possess. The blinding red warning text continued to flash relentlessly, and his pathetic begging played on a continuous, humiliating loop. An older investor in the third row, a man known for his ruthless corporate litigation and absolute lack of mercy, stood up and aggressively buttoned his suit jacket. "This is an absolute disgrace," the investor barked, pointing a furious finger directly at Chloe. "You brought us here to sell us stolen assets. My legal team will be contacting your studio before the hour is up for conspiracy to commit federal fraud. You have completely lost your mind." One by one, the titans of the industry rose from their seats in absolute disgust. They grabbed their briefcases and coats, storming toward the heavy acoustic doors. The room filled with angry shouts, demands for immediate audits, and the sounds of doors slamming shut. Chloe turned to Julian, her hands shaking with unadulterated fury. "You are finished," she hissed, her voice venomous and cold. "I will bury you under so many lawsuits you will never see the light of day again." She spun on her heels and strode out of the auditorium, leaving him entirely alone. Julian stood frozen behind the podium, his chest heaving, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He was utterly abandoned, isolated in an empty room, surrounded by the glaring red proof of his deception. His stolen empire had not merely crumbled, I had forced him to publicly dismantle his own legacy. Exactly 48 hours later, the fallout was absolute. Facing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit from Chloe's legal team and an immediate, permanent industry blacklist, Julian was effectively a ghost in the Seattle technology scene. I was stepping out of the revolving glass doors of my attorney's office when he ambushed me on the sidewalk. He looked completely destroyed. His expensive designer clothes were wrinkled and stained, his eyes bloodshot and frantic. The arrogant visionary was completely gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered animal, right there on the busy downtown pavement. He dropped to his knees, grabbing the edge of my coat. "Gianna, please," he sobbed, the tears flowing freely down his pale, unshaven face. "You have to give me the decryption key. Just unlock the files so I can give the studio the assets. I can fix this. I only did all of this to secure a massive payday for our future. I was trying to build an empire for us." I looked down at the pathetic creature groveling at my feet. I did not even blink. I reached into my leather tote bag, pulled out a thick manila envelope, and dropped it squarely onto his chest. It hit him with a heavy, satisfying thud. "Those are the divorce papers, fully signed," I said, my voice steady and cold as ice. "Beneath them is a court-ordered restraining order requiring you to stay exactly 500 feet away from me at all times, and the final document is a formal notification of a federal lawsuit for felony intellectual property theft." He stared at the papers scattered on the concrete, his mouth opening and closing in silent horror. He reached out, his hands trembling violently. "But the project," he stammered. "If you do not unlock it, the asset is worthless. We both lose everything." I offered him a serene, razor-sharp smile. "Oh, Julian, you really think I let my masterpiece sit in a locked vault?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear the final nail being driven into his coffin. "While you were sleeping so peacefully on my sofa that last night, I did not just write a virus. I packaged the fully optimized, flawless master files and sold the exclusive rights directly to Chloe Vance's biggest corporate rival. They bought the virtual reality universe for exactly 5 times the amount you were trying to steal it for. Your spectacular public meltdown created a massive panic in the market. I simply used your humiliation to drive the price up to a record-breaking high." The last drop of hope drained from his eyes, leaving behind a hollow, desolate void. He was totally broken. I turned my back on him and walked toward my waiting car, leaving the parasite sitting in the literal gutter of his own ruined life. The view from the top floor of the tallest technology tower in Seattle is truly breathtaking. I stepped into my new corner office, the words "Senior Creative Director" etched perfectly into the frosted glass door. I walked over to the sprawling window, holding a warm cup of espresso, and looked down at the bustling city below. I had not just reclaimed my justice. I had rewritten the entire architecture of my destiny, permanently deleting the dead weight from my universe. I hit detonate, and from the ashes, I built my own empire. Thank you so deeply for listening to our story today. Where in the world are you tuning in from right now? Please let me know in the comments below. If you found today's journey captivating, we would be incredibly grateful if you could help us out with just a $1 donation. You can easily support us by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or by using the PayPal link in the description or comment section. Your generosity helps our dedicated team pay their salaries, support their families, and allows us to keep creating even better stories for you to enjoy. Thank you again from the bottom of our hearts, and have a wonderful day.